Alright, how's it everyone? Good afternoon. Today we're going to go through some of the different size settlements and how we classify them. So we have gone through this in our slideshow, but we will be going through this using Google Earth so we can see some examples of some of the urban areas and rural areas that we've been through already. So let's get into it. As you remember, the first smallest unit of a rural settlement, the smallest form of settlement, is what we would call an isolated farmstead. And here's an example of one that's in KZN. You can see it's literally a single property with a fence, some evidence of rural activities, some farming happening, but no other buildings around, very close, and definitely not definitely not any other services in the area or shops or anything. So that would be the smallest unit. Then moving up from the isolated farmstead, this is also still in KZN, we have a hamlet. So a hamlet is not even a village yet, but it's just a very loosely arranged set of isolated farmsteads. So you can see here, it's just a couple of houses, a couple of properties, evidence of rural activities taking place. There looks like some farming happening at the top and the bottom. No services here, no real evidence of complex urban services yet. So this would still be classified as a rural settlement because primary activities are taking place. Then we move up to the last unit of the rural settlement. So if you get a few more people together, you will get a village. Now, a village actually is still associated with primary activities and is still a rural settlement, but you can start to see there are more people in a village. A village is slightly larger, has more population in it, and you'll see there's a school here, and it looks like there are a few other services around. There's probably a shop somewhere in the region, and you start to see the structure of blocks forming and certain roads, but this is still counting as a rural settlement because primary activities are taking place. Right, so now we can, after the next one, we move now out of a village to the first unit that is classified as a town. Now all that a town is a urban settlement with a bigger population and more complex services. So this is Ulundi in KZN, and you can see even from the zoomed out view, we've got many settlements located all around, which shows that the population is a lot larger. If you zoom in though, you can also see there are now slightly more complex services. There's a racetrack, there's what looks to be a CBD kind of running down the middle. There's an industrial area, and there's now lots more evidence of things that are not primary activities but are related to secondary and tertiary activities. You have factories, you have manufacturing areas, you have a lot more infrastructure, you have paved roads, you have big residential areas, and yeah, we start to see this is now an example of an urban settlement, right? You do not see any farms, there's no farming taking place anywhere here. There are secondary and tertiary activities taking place. Lots of schools, from some hospitals, there's the Department of Public Works, and you see a very large urban area, some churches with lots of services and higher, more complexity of functions. Now, if you were to grow a town, you would find that the town would classify it as a city. Now, for the city example, we're going to look at Richards Bay, which is along the coastline of South Africa. Let's just get the north arrow centered there. And Richards Bay we would classify as a city. Now, a city is an area with a large population, which you can see Richards Bay does have. If you zoom in, obviously Richards Bay has a big harbour and lots of infrastructure, port facilities for the harbour. You also then see a a large area of associated industrial areas. You see there's the University of Zululand, there's residential areas, churches, hospitals, schools. So it's basically a town, but on a big scale. So much larger, higher population, much more complexity. There's UNISA down there, lots more churches. You can see there is a bit of what looks like forestry taking place on the edges, on the outskirts, but definitely this is an area driven by secondary and tertiary and possibly quaternary activities as well. So Richards Bay would be an example of a city. Okay. Now we start to get to the bigger, larger sides of the urban areas. And the example we're going to go to next would be of a conurbation. So conurbation is what you get when a whole lot of urban areas and cities coalesce, which means they grow and expand into each other. And the first example we're going to look at is actually Gauteng, where we are right now. And you will see that if we jump to Gauteng, much of Gauteng is actually hard to separate. You can't really tell where Johannesburg ends and Krugersdorp begins. You can't really tell where Midrand and Centurion and even Pretoria in the north, they're not really distinct anymore. They're becoming one huge urban area. The same is happening towards the east and west. So everywhere from basically Springs and Nigel is one big urban area through the East Rand, all the way through to the West Rand, and all the way down to the south of Joburg too. You've got Soweto, Lenasia in the south, and then basically Katlehong in the south as well. So that would be, Gauteng's a great example of a conurbation where all these urban areas have grown so much that they are now joined. They've become indistinguishable from each other. But there's a larger kind of urban unit in this, which we call a metropolitan area, or Metropolis. And we're going to look at the Cape Town, the Southwestern Cape region. And you will see in the Southwestern Cape, you've got the city of Cape Town, but it is surrounded by many, many, many dependent towns. So you've got Stellenbosch, you've got Belleville there, you've got Paarl up north, Malmesbury, Atlanta. So even though you've got Wellington over there, Paarl, even though you've got the big urban area, it's surrounded by these dependent towns. There are many, many, many of them. So this we would call the metropolis of Cape Town. Very dense, very complex area, lots of services, and in the city itself there's not exactly, you can see it, there's no primary activities taking place at all. This is all secondary, tertiary and quaternary activities. High population, very dense, airports, universities, things like that. Then we get to the final largest urban unit, which is the top of the hierarchy, which is a megalopolis. And a megalopolis is entire vast regions of cities that have joined together. It's basically when conurbations join. So you've got conurbations joining into other conurbations. So cities that have now joined together with other cities over massive areas. And the first one we're going to go to is Tokyo. So Tokyo in Japan is the first example we're going to look at of a megalopolis. And if you look at Tokyo, even from a zoomed out view, you will see it is a massive urban area of entire conurbation. So cities, groups of cities that have merged into a massive basically city province. You can see the transport routes radiating out around this in this nice radial pattern. You can see the harbour. You can imagine the population density of this area, and I mean, if you zoom in, you'll see how large it actually is. It's pretty crazy to see Tokyo. Massive public transport. There's no primary activities taking place here. There's no space for a farm or a mine or anything. There are massive industrial areas, and it's just like this endless scroll of a city. So that's an example of a megalopolis. is when these conurbations and cities just merge into each other. And you can see here there's universities, there are hospitals, there are recreational facilities, there are banks, there are schools. So everything, so secondary, tertiary, quaternary activity is definitely taking place in Tokyo. If you zoom out, I mean, it's staggering the scale of this city. Um, and it's not even a city; it's grown into, the cities around Tokyo have actually merged into conurbations, and the conurbations have now merged into one big megalopolis as well. So you can see how big it is. You know, almost visible from space, basically. And then the last example of a megalopolis is the eastern seaboard of the United States. So we start up here in near New York, Manhattan Island up here, and you can see how we've got massive cities that have become conurbations, and the conurbations have joined to just become these huge urban areas that have no beginning and no end, really. So you can see the entire, there's, going all the way from here, from the famous parts, Brooklyn. If you zoom in, you will see just massive wall-to-wall cities, lots of secondary, tertiary, and quaternary activities here, and lots of banking, massive banking sector, extremely high land values, lots of infrastructure, very dense population, and this urban area basically extends for very far down the coast. So the entire east coast basically has an uninterrupted urban area. You can see there's a few primary activities taking place in the center, but basically unbroken urban areas going down the entire eastern coast of the United States. Okay, so that's your urban hierarchy. Very cool to see. It's nice to see examples of these cities. There are many examples like these, and you just need to know where the boundary lies between rural and urban. So the first few would be the rural sides are the isolated farmstead, then the hamlets, then the village, and then as the hierarchy moves on, you've got a town, which is the first urban settlement, a city, a conurbation, the metropolis, and then the megalopolis. Cool, thanks.